Darth Vader pushing the boundaries of Disney Plus. Thank goodness Vader goes for bloodless kills. But by the way, for everyone who's saying Reva isn't redeemable, you love Anakin and look at his body count. So that argument doesn't hold any water. Yes, in episode 3 though, we get an outdoor hallway fight, which might not be as visually arresting as the Rogue One sequence, but it's still pretty badass. The directing on this show is awful. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this discussion. But that was a very cool sequence here. I like calling it an outdoor hallway fight, because that's what it was. But Vader, sensing Obi Wan, kills civilians by dragging them from their hiding places using the Force. That was fantastic. And again, an effort to draw Obi Wan out. And Obi Wan, talk about cowardly. There's so much to say about Obi Wan's mental state, and I don't think the show's doing enough with it. But he didn't come out. He was willing to let Owen sacrifice himself. He let all these civilians die. I mean, I think those deaths, at least in today's episode, are a little on Obi-Wan as well. But, Reva employed the same tactic, by the way, or at least tried to with Owen back on Tatooine before her co-worker stopped her. But she's definitely a junior Vader, outfit and all. It's funny, during the watch-along with Vader and his Inquisitors showing up, one of you said, "Corporate's here," and it does feel very much like that, which is maybe why the Kylo Ren undercover boss SNL sketch also works so well. Sadly, horribly, Moses Ingram has been getting a lot of hate online, and one of the many people to come to her defense is O'Shea Jackson Jr., who tweeted, "Just wait until these haters see my character." And that made me think, I bet he's Quinlan Vos, who gets a shout out in today's episode, which is great. I think we really need more diversity amongst Jedi characters. People to this day are very frustrated that Finn never really got to be a Jedi. That was one of the worst things Star Wars ever did, making him a space janitor instead of the Jedi he was supposed to be. Remember those cool posters for the first Disney Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens? That was a really, really bad idea to make that a fake out. But anyway, I think it would be great to have him play Quinlan Vos. And here what they establish is that he's like ahead of Obi Wan and Leia on this Jedi Underground Railroad. Now, we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, Obi Wan and Quinlan, for those of you who aren't familiar with the character, first worked together in where else? Filoni's The Clone Wars, where they took on Cad Bane. It's all coming together. And after Order 66, Star Wars canon has Quinlan going into hiding and helping younglings escape the Empire, which is what you see here. Aside from the continued problems of, so I would love that. I think that would just be absolutely fantastic. Now, aside from the continued problems of pacing with this show, it's funny, one of you tweeted me in frustration that you turned this episode off halfway today. And myself and others were like, no, go back, you missed the best stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the rest of the show after you went back. But the pacing is still awful. The acting and VFX were a little better this week, although that loader droid was cheap as right? Design-wise. I mean, it's a guy in a suit, and I know that's what C-3PO is, but that was made in the 70s. This is 2022. And I know that there's like a cozy factor to be like, it's got that cozy antique practical effects feel. But I feel with droids and aliens, they should work harder to make them more droidy and alien-y. I didn't like that. But that's a small complaint. My big complaint is that I thought it really trivialized the Underground Railroad to do a half-assed adaptation here and flip it around where you have a black character hunting white characters. I mean, how did they not realize how inappropriate this is at Lucasfilm? Now, runaway slaves would actually write or draw on the walls of the safe houses where they were held when they were going along the Underground Railroad, not only for posterity, but in case they didn't make it, wanting some record of themselves in the world. And I say write or draw because a lot of slaves were not given an education intentionally by their owners, which is, of course, horrific. But also Jewish people and others in hiding from the Nazis during World War II would also leave markings and writings on the walls of the safe houses where they were hiding. So, to equate that with fictional characters being hunted, I mean, if you're going to do that, you got to do it really well. You have to be very careful. And I think you need to make sure it's a teachable moment where you can say, I'll do it. Go look at your history. Look at if you should, hopefully this would make, you realize that this happened in real life with not only the Underground Railroad, but during World War II. And I don't think this show does enough to make that the case. They should maybe tweet about it. They should have something at the end, some companion piece, or maybe just do this in not such broad strokes, quite frankly. It's just done, I think, so poorly here that I think that's what makes it offensive. I have no problem with, adapting real world things to fantasy to remind people of it and to underscore that this could really happen. But you got to do it right. Now, speaking of the writings and drawings on the wall of that safe house, Reva, when she discovered it, sees that someone drew the Jedi symbol, and that really makes her particularly upset. And so I think the theory going around that Reva is one of the younglings in that opening scene, I think it's gaining traction and validity. And perhaps Anakin, who infamously killed the younglings, spared her, sensing her potential for the dark side, maybe? Hayden Christensen flashback scene? So far, I can't believe this is all he's been asked to do. And it reminded me totally of this meme. It's like, who is that? I think at first you're supposed to think that it might be Qui-Gon Jinn, because it's the robe from behind, and Obi-Wan's been trying to reach him, but instead it's Anakin. What a surprise for Obi-Wan, and they're both haunting him, which is interesting. I like that. There's so many good elements here that I just don't think are properly done. So I give the show half points for having them, but not execute. But I can't give them full points because they don't execute them correctly. But anyway, perhaps that's why Reva is so eager to please Vader by bringing him Obi-Wan and becoming his Grand Inquisitor. I think, you guys keep talking about the Sith rule of 2 every week. I think, where is Vader's apprentice? I think it should be Reva. But I think, there's clearly a lot to Reva, and she clearly has a very interesting backstory, which I'm excited to find out about. And as I said before, I get the sense that she's going to turn good by the end of the series and maybe become a Jedi. Now, this week, some of you thought during the watch along that maybe she might sacrifice herself. I think that's why Reva's performance seems just a little off, because I think she's at war with herself. I think there is good in her. I don't think she's as fully over to the dark side. I think she wants to be. That's interesting. I think this stuff is not well enough explained to make it clear, but I think she's almost like a child trying to prove herself to her father, and be like, I'm just like you, Dad. But she's not quite there. It's almost like playing dress up a little bit, which she literally is doing, dressed like Vader. I love that. And so she's not totally on the dark side. And I think Obi-Wan will eventually pull her to his side. But some of you said maybe she'll sacrifice herself to save Obi-Wan. And, Disney's got to stop killing its villains. Or, in this case, she would become a hero and then get killed, but I don't want that to happen. I would love to see her maybe go off with Quinlan to help to save other younglings to make up for her own sins as an Inquisitor, and then she would get to continue this character in Moses Ingram in the Star Wars universe, showing up in other movies and shows and animation. I think that would be really great, because that's the deal these days. That you can pop up anywhere, and I think we really enjoy that. All right, so, and again, I love that all the Inquisitors are dressed like Vader, and it really makes his presence felt even when he's not there. But let's talk Vader. I thought it was very cool to see him getting ready for work at the beginning of the episode. Talk about a walk-in closet. To underscore how much of his humanity has been taken from him, how scarred he is, how much pain he's in. But, he destroyed his own soul long before his fight with Obi Wan, that iconic fight, because, again, he killed all those younglings during Order 66. Obi Wan just made the outside look like the inside, thank you very much. And I enjoyed seeing his sweet corner office, too, speaking of corporate. He's got a corner office. I love it. As for his battle with Obi Wan towards the end of this episode, you definitely get the sense that he's toying with Obi-Wan, not only sadistically like a cat plays with a mouse, but I think perhaps to test Obi-Wan to see where his abilities are after 10 years. And Vader quickly learns that Obi-Wan is really out of practice. In fact, Obi-Wan doesn't even want to fight, running away from Vader both literally and figuratively, like running away from a nightmare, which is why it's very powerful when he finally turns his lightsaber on, and it does seem a lot brighter, right? Reminding us of reminding us of his line earlier in this very episode to Leia, where he says the Force feels like turning a light on in the darkness. That was great. And you can really feel the contrast of Obi-Wan's cool, soothing blue lightsaber versus Vader's nightmarish red lightsaber, which doesn't really turn the lights on. It's, it's just, plunges you further into the nightmare. But I think it's really cool. This lightsaber battle today was horribly directed, and again, I'm really surprised after how well she did with Mando that Deborah Chow has done such a poor job directing here. But still, it's Obi-Wan versus Vader. You can't really mess that up. I mean, even as poorly as this is done, it's still cool. This fight is probably, hopefully, just an appetizer to a much longer fight later on during this season. Although it's a limited series. They're not going to come back to this, although it's doing so well. But hopefully this is, we have one really big fight between the two of them before we're done here. And they're going to have to really rely on choreography and directing, hopefully, to make that fight interesting. As Obi-Wan versus Vader, which we talked about today when we were doing the live watch-along, there are no stakes. Because we know they both make it out of here alive, because Vader doesn't kill Obi-Wan until A New Hope. Well, actually, Obi-Wan sacrifices himself. That's a big point of contention. Does he drop before the lightsaber hits him? That's always been something. It's like, who shot first? Was Obi-Wan killed, or did he again sacrifice himself? Or, either way, he would sacrifice himself. But you know what I mean. But anyway, that's an iconic fight, and this show would do well to lean into that. Vader might not kill Obi-Wan on this show, but we know how their story ends. And I think there's a way, creatively, to make that a plus rather than a minus. A good show would use that to its advantage, to be like, this is so weird knowing how it's going to end. If only you guys knew how this was going to end. And they should, I mean, if you have to deal with people knowing how the story ends, deal with people knowing how the story ends. Embrace it, run into it full, head on. And I don't think this show is doing that, at least not yet. Here, Vader burns Obi-Wan's arm, in a scene I felt that was ultimately a bit clumsy. When he threw the rocks down with the Force, I was like, ooh, what are you going to do with that? I thought he was going to have them hover and, one by one, just chuck them at Obi-Wan to, cut him and hurt him, kind of like stoning him, but Vader doing it by himself with the Force. I thought that's what he was going to do. But then when he leaned down to light it on fire, I can't believe that Deborah Chow wasn't like, let's do that again, and can you be a little more suave? You're a cool guy. But anyway, I guess, so he burns Obi-Wan's arm, being like, how do you like it? How do you like it? Stop burning yourself, Obi-Wan. Stop burning yourself. But anyway, I guess you could argue that, that is a wound that you would not see in A New Hope because Alec Guinness has long sleeves on. But Alec Guinness is acting totally fine. He's not like, I got this old war injury on my arm. So I don't really think it works. And it is frustrating to see Obi-Wan so reluctant to use his lightsaber or even his Jedi mind tricks when there were so many opportunities to do so this episode. And he so famously and easily did those things in A New Hope. He's not at all bothered in A New Hope. I mean, he's a little bothered, but he's not as bothered as he is here. So I guess this is maybe showing again how he got to that point. Again, I think if this show focused more on Obi-Wan's mental state, a la Logan, the show would be more universally praised and wouldn't be having some of the problems that it is. And again, a commentary on masters and apprentices would be fantastic. I mean, they kind of have that, but they don't have it nearly enough. Because you got Obi-Wan trying to reach, again, Qui-Gon Jinn. You have Vader and Reva. But I think when you throw Leia into the mix, it kind of messes everything up. Again, it's the problem of Star Wars these days being so nostalgia reliant and checking a lot of boxes rather than what works with the story. And also, on that note, it's weird that Leia would ask Obi-Wan about the Force, and it seems to not occur to him at all that she could be potentially Force sensitive. There are female Jedi. I mean, he's all focused on training Luke, but what about Leia? I mean, hey, it's not easy. George Lucas, because again, he made a lot of this up on the fly when he was doing the original movies, has made a little bit of a ball of yarn. But Filoni could figure it out. And again, you can really feel the loss of Filoni not being involved with this show. I would have, why don't they knock on his door and be like, hey, Dave, I got a problem. How do I fix this? Because I do like, establishing Obi-Wan and Leia's relationship, because clearly they have one when we see them in A New Hope. But first I want to say Obi-Wan is dressed like a Jedi, and it makes it really weird that none of the stormtroopers seem to realize that he's the Jedi they're looking for. And again, the perfect opportunity for him to say, I am not the Jedi you're looking for. Why didn't he do it? I did appreciate Leia stepping up, by the way, with some pretty good saves here. I thought that was good. And again, Obi-Wan has serious trust issues after what happened with Anakin, as he refuses to wait even a few minutes for Kumail Nanjiani's contact. Although Leia didn't want to wait either, to be fair. Also, Leia picking up on the fact that Obi-Wan knew her parents was very touching. And the actress, I thought, handled these scenes better than she's been doing the other ones. She handled the dramatic stuff quite well. And so I thought that was great. And I thought it was really touching when she thought Obi-Wan might be her real dad. And I love that he said, "I wish that I could tell you that was true." And I love that he didn't try and replace Anakin. He was like, pretty much. I mean, I thought that was nice. But then you have Vader walking down the street later in this very episode, so close to Leia. That's her dad. I'm surprised he can't sense her, even though, of course, he thinks his child died with Padme. And, of course, he doesn't even know he has twins. And he's so focused on Obi-Wan, I guess it makes sense from Vader's perspective, but I don't think the show highlighted it enough. And, of course, Vader will kidnap her years later in A New Hope, and Leia's not at all afraid of him, so I think you're probably going to get that established here as well. So Leia will probably get a good look at Vader. I mean, Reva's kidnapped her, so I guess they're both going to wherever the Inquisitors are stationed. And I know it's a little bit of a fake out because in the trailers they had Luke. They teased Luke, so people thought it was going to be, you guys, I feel bad for Luke fans. You're always getting teased, and it's always a fake out. But Luke didn't really know Ben Kenobi in A New Hope. He was like, oh yeah, that hermit Ben Kenobi who's always lurking around the farm like a weirdo. I mean, that's all he knows of him. So they can't really have any adventures together because they do in A New Hope. That's when Luke has his Obi-Wan adventure. But Leia clearly knows him because, again, she calls out to him for help at the beginning of that movie. So I like establishing that they know each other. She probably knew him her whole life growing up, maybe. I don't know. Would she only remember him from being a child? I would think he would. But then how often did Obi-Wan leave Tatooine to go check in on Leia? This is a bit of a mess. Dave Filoni, we need you. Come fix this. All right, finally, 2 things that I want to say. I loved the stormtrooper getting cut in half by the electric gate. Very Star Wars. These stormtroopers are hilarious. They're the original minions. Also, for some reason, I liked how dirty these stormtroopers were. Like, it seemed very organic. They're at an obscure post. No one's checking up on them. They don't bother to clean their outfits. I thought it was great, their armor. And this alien, where Zach Braff did an amazing Seth Rogen impression, this alien is a direct ripoff of a famous alien character from the comic book Saga. What a comic. Where the writer Brian K. Vaughan has been going around for quite some time now, for years, saying he doesn't think that the comic could be adapted into a show. Well, I think with all these big streaming shows these days based on other comics, it's pretty clear that Saga could be a show. It should be a show, because let me tell you, Saga would be to Star Wars what The Boys is to the superhero genre. Amazon, go buy Saga. Get on that. Although Amazon doesn't seem to have the money for their streaming shows like the other services do. So that's the only thing that gives me pause. Netflix, go buy Saga. That's who should buy Saga. So those are my thoughts on episode 3 of Obi-Wan, a show that I think is okay, but it really relies heavily on nostalgia and particularly people's love of the prequels. And if anyone loves the prequels, it's thanks to Dave Filoni. Speaking of masters and apprentices, Dave Filoni, of course, is the apprentice of George Lucas, who has now become the master. And is Jon Favreau his apprentice? Oh, I love it. All right, so what did you think? What do you think of this episode? What do you think how the show is developing? And do you think that O'Shea Jackson Jr. is playing Quinlan Voss? All right, share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.